We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
It's election day and it's all about the economy, stupid. You're listening to Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and here's the news you need to know. And with this election day edition of Wallet Watch, we've got Chris Calandra from Elliott Wealth Management with us. Chris, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about our discussion, given that it is election day. All elections are important. I think this one is particularly intense for a midterm election, especially. It's going to be wild to see how it all turns out.
It really is. There are so many elections today that are rated as toss ups, they're just too close to call. And I suspect this is going to be a late night for a lot of the election watchers.
I think you're probably right, and a lot of highly contested races, a lot of mixed polling. Pollsters have trouble in today's environment with technology and the lack of landlines. I don't think they've really caught up to all the changes that have taken place over these many years. So it's a little unclear how accurate the polls are, and then some are very biased. It's easy to tell sometimes how biased they are. Other times it's a little sneakier a version of bias. So there's a lot of uncertainty, although the prevailing wisdom, which I believe, is that the Republicans are likely to be pleased with the results. And my personal opinion, Eric, is that the Republicans will pick up between 25 and 30 seats in the House. That would give them control of the House. I think if you were doing the over-under game, I think it's more likely they would go over 30 than under 25 because of the trend pushing towards the Republican line of thinking on election day. And I believe, although this is a little more controversial, is that the Republicans will win the Senate. I believe it'll be a 52-person majority, probably a runoff in Georgia between Warnock and Walker, but that race will not hang the Senate in the balance like last election. So I think good chance the Republicans, after the runoff, end up with a 53-person majority.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. I agree with that. And I think it's important for people to remember that, with the exception of 3 midterm elections over the past 100 years, the vote has always gone against the incumbent party. So it doesn't matter if the Democrats are in power or the Republicans are in power, they generally lose in the midterms, whoever has the White House and has the Congress. So, that's a wind that's at the Republicans' backs right now.
Absolutely.
And the other wind that seems to be at the back is, as I said at the top of this, it's the economy, stupid. And James Carville coined that phrase for Bill Clinton back in the 90s. People have been repeating it over and over again. The economy is the number one concern of voters. And yet, with all of the economic news going on, the Democrats have chosen to almost ignore the issue and, in some cases, just poo poo it. We just had comments by Joe Biden over the course of the last few days that he is shutting down oil and shutting down coal. And energy is a big part of what is causing inflation. So, what did you think of those comments, and how are people going to react?
I think people will react negatively. I think at first glance, Americans probably will underestimate how important energy is in terms of, I think there's something like 6,000 products that are based on petroleum. It is in every facet of our lives. And so high energy costs, rising energy costs are very much a contributor to inflation. And that's going to get lost. The details might get lost on a lot of people because they may not appreciate all the nuances. But instinctually, at a gut level, they get that energy prices are the most important element, or one of the most important element that is driving inflation and impacting their pocketbook issues. And when you hear the president say that he is against fossil fuels in the strongest possible terms over the last couple of days, which, to be fair, is consistent with what he campaigned on and consistent with what he did on his first day in office. He's pretty consistent about it, at least in this election cycle when he ran for president. I don't think Americans like that and agree with it. Conceptually, they might, because the idea of a cleaner world and cleaner energy, and I mean, there's a lot to like there, but you can't replace something with nothing. And so I believe Americans will dislike that, and they will tie that rhetoric to inflation and high energy prices and drive more votes to the Republican side of the aisle. That's my prediction.
Yeah, it's important to remember all of the different things. It's not just electricity. As we approach winter, it's going to be the cost of heating oil. It's going to be the cost of gas to heat the homes. It's the cost of diesel fuel, which delivers virtually every item you buy to the supermarkets and to the stores. So all of that raises prices. I was just watching an interview with a diner owner. He was saying, they say inflation is 8%, but he was paying 14 cents per egg. And now it's 40 cents an egg, which is a lot more than 8%. So you're seeing at the supermarket, prices have gone up over 8% because you've got prices going up because of inflation, and then you've got the energy increases on top of that to get things to places. Farming relies on diesel, so that's going to raise the prices of food. And the head of the BCC yesterday, either yesterday or the day before, made a comment that maybe people should be eating more Chef Boyardee to deal with inflation.
Yeah, I don't think Americans are going to love that idea.
No. And with all of that going on, we're also seeing we had a very mixed jobs report come out last Friday. We created more jobs than were expected, but the participation rate is down again. And since that jobs report came out, big tech has announced massive layoffs. Twitter has cut half of its company. Facebook is looking at its largest layoff in its history. Companies like Stripe and Uber are cutting their staff. Amazon and Apple have announced hiring freezes. So for all of Biden's talk about a strong job market, the numbers aren't really bearing that out anymore.
Yes, and I'll also add that the unemployment rate ticked up. I think it got as low under the Biden administration of 3.5% a couple of months ago, and it ticked up recently to 3.7. Low by historical standards, but not as low as it was in 2019 before the pandemic. And you're seeing signs of strain in the job market. Last time we were together on air, you pointed that out. I'm a little bit more optimistic than maybe you are. It's important to note for your listeners, though, if you listen to Fed Chairman Powell's remarks last week, where the Federal Reserve raised interest rates again, and that increase was 0.75%. They're very aggressive in raising interest rates. Basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, that they want to destroy demand. They want to slow down demand. The Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to destroy demand in an effort to get demand in better equilibrium with supply, which will bring down the inflation rate. And how you, if you're going to destroy demand, that means you're going to need a weaker job market. So this is not happening in a vacuum. It's not happening by accident. Some of it is contributable to the president's policies and the Democrats' policies, but some of it increasingly amounts is based on what the Federal Reserve has to do or feels it has to do to break the back of inflation. So the Fed is trying very hard to get the job market to be weaker than it is, to destroy demand, to get inflation under control. If you're the Biden administration and you're in power, that's kind of a difficult thing to govern over. Of course, I believe the Biden administration made their bed by contributing greatly to inflation. It's not all of their fault, but their policies contributed to it as opposed to trying to minimize it. But Jerome Powell's comments consistently through this interest rate rise cycle makes you believe if they get their way, and they probably will, Eric, you're going to get a worsening job market and you're going to get demand destruction.
Yeah, and we should also point out that rising interest rates are not necessarily a bad thing, because last time I checked, actually Americans' savings had gone up with all of the stimulus money. People were putting money away in savings. Now you're going to see banks actually paying interest on your savings. Investment accounts that also rely on interest rates for cash in the account, those are going to be paying more. So there are upsides to higher
Absolutely.
interest rates.
Yes, any government policy, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers, and the art of leadership is to help as many people as you can without hurting, minimize the amount of hurt that you have. Things, it seems to me, and if you believe the polling, most Americans feel that that balance has been greatly upset over the last 2 years, to the point where something like 7.5 out of 10 Americans believe the country is on the wrong track. And that is an outgrowth of what we're talking about. Very unsettled feeling amongst lots of Americans today. And to get to that 7 to 8 kind of range out of 10, you're not just talking about Republicans exclusively, who of course are unhappy with a Democrat president and a Democrat Congress, but you're incorporating some independents, lots of independents probably, and some Democrats even.
Yeah, according to the polls, there are a lot of Democrats, especially in swing states, that have decided to not back the Democratic candidates because of specific decisions. I think you're seeing the blowback of the energy policies in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. You're seeing the blowback in education among suburban women who, over the last several months, swung from supporting Democrats by 16% to supporting Republicans by 20%. So that
Yes.
was a massive swing. You're seeing groups that have been taken for granted switch parties. You're seeing African Americans say, you know what, the Democrats haven't done anything for us. You're seeing Hispanics saying the Democrats haven't done anything for us. And in fact, that goes back to the labor market, because if you break down the numbers, during the Trump administration, he always touted lowest African American unemployment, lowest Hispanic unemployment, lowest unemployment rate for women. You're not seeing that anymore. You're seeing historic lows overall, but it's primarily white males that are benefiting, and minority groups are seeing higher unemployment. So that's breaking up what the Democrats have considered their base, and now they don't have that to bank on.
Yeah, it's very well said. And as a quick side note, I still find it incredible that those statistics about getting to historical low unemployment rates for Blacks, Hispanics, and women was not celebrated by this country during the Trump administration, just because it happened under the Trump administration. I think that's just shameful. But I think going back to the election today and the state of the economy, I think a lot of Americans, even if you identify as a Democrat or identify as a Republican, you could be influenced on a lot of issues and you could kind of go along with a lot. But you want your government, you want your leadership to pass the basic competency test. And if you don't pass the base competency test, this is my opinion now, of course, Eric, they're going to reject what you want to do, even if you otherwise might be willing to go along with it. And I think that's what's plaguing the Biden administration and why some Democrats will cross and vote for Republicans, while other people that are independents will skew more to Republican, where maybe in the 2020 they skewed more towards the Biden administration, the Biden campaign. They haven't. There's lots of signs that Americans, including me, don't believe they passed the basic competency. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan is an example on the geopolitical front. The rampant inflation combined with the unwillingness of the Biden administration to take it head on. This is my opinion. Now, the Biden administration and his supporters will talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll talk about how he released oil from the strategic reserves. But I think Americans largely see through that. I don't believe that enough Americans of all stripes feel that the Biden administration, that President Biden himself has passed the basic competency test.
Well said. And thanks for being here on this Election Day edition of Raw Naked Truth. And remember, no matter what the polls say, every vote counts. Whoever you're supporting, get out there and vote if you haven't already. And that's the Raw Naked Truth. You can catch every episode of the Raw Naked Truth at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and any platform that respects freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.